Welcome to this panel discussion presented by New South Wales Family Day Care Association's PD in Your Pocket program. The topic for this month is making professional decisions in family day care. The panelists in this discussion are Dr. Anne Kennedy, Sharon Foran, the manager of Ballina Byron Family Daycare, Kylie McGovern, Family Daycare Educator, also from Ballina Byron Family Daycare, and the interview and presenter is Catharine Hydon.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Catharine Hydon and welcome to our panel discussion as part of the PD in Your Pocket series brought to you by New South Wales Family Daycare Association. This panel discussion welcomes three distinguished guests in a bit of a different format for PD in Your Pocket, where we're going to have a panel discussion. So we really welcome the participants who are joining us tonight to pull up a chair, get a cup of tea, and feel like you're part of the discussion about what it means to be a professional decision maker. So I'm going to ask these lovely people, and I'll introduce them in a moment, to share their insights about being a professional decision maker. You know, how can we make the choices that are in the best interests of children and their families, and how can we sort of navigate that? And we'll be talking a little bit also about some practicalities and some big thinking. So feel free to take notes, and you'll be able to also come back and have a think about some of these things as we progress through PD in Your Pocket. So let me introduce you to these amazing people. We're firstly joined by Dr. Anne Kennedy. Hello, I was going to say good morning, but actually, who knows when it is? Hello, Anne. Anne's a consultant, mentor, writer, researcher in early childhood education, and a great friend and advocate for early childhood education in Australia. So welcome, Anne.
Thanks, Catherine. Lovely to be with everyone and with the panel members.
And also we're joined by Sharon Foran, who is the manager at Ballina Byron Family Daycare. And Sharon, I believe you have 30 years experience in family daycare.
I do. It makes me sound really old, doesn't it? Yeah. I've had all the roles in family daycare. I've been an educator, I've been a coordinator, I've been an assistant manager, and now for the last 10 years I've been a manager. So yeah, I'm really excited and quite honoured to be in the company of you and Anne. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, likewise, Sharon, we're very excited that you're here. And very importantly, we are joined by a family daycare educator who does this on a daily basis. So it's very important that we think about the practical and practice components of decision making. So hello, Kylie McGovern, how are you? It's fantastic that you can be here. And I understand that you've been working in early childhood education for about, 12, 13 years, but you're now joined Ballina Byron Family Daycare in the last year or so. Is that right?
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for having me on board today. Yes, I've recently transitioned from long day care to family daycare. I've been operating for almost a year now and really enjoying the change in my career. So thank you for having me on board.
It's fantastic that you can be here, and what a great way of thinking about your early childhood career. In fact, that you could spend some time working in a centre-based setting and then some work in family daycare. So a great thing that we're able to do. So I want to start with Anne, and I'm going to get Anne to help us understand the art of decision making, because I'm not sure whether it's something that we talk about all the time, that people are going to make decisions, and some of our participants here and you will also no doubt recall that when we started developing the updated the early years learning framework and then the updated framework, we are sort of deeply in that space. We're thinking about the way that people make decisions about what they do. So can you start us off, Anne, by saying, why is it important to be an effective decision maker in family daycare?
Yeah, I'm going to come at it from a different angle, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think what's at the heart of it is that when you're working as a family daycare educator or any other educator in any other setting, you're working as a professional. And professionals have to make decisions. You're not on a production line making sausages. If you're on a production line making sausages, you don't make any decisions, really. You follow instructions. And it would be dangerous indeed for you to decide to do something different on that production line. But when you're working with children and families and colleagues, you're acting as a professional. And that's one of the hallmarks of being a professional, is that you make decisions, because And the decisions are important because they don't just impact you or the sausages, they impact children, families, communities, colleagues. And so it's the fact that you have to make them as a professional, and it's the fact that it has enormous impact. And sometimes those decisions are small and the impact might not be great. You know, it really doesn't matter to the children much if there's red paint or blue paint. But if you decide not to have paint at all, you know, maybe that is a breach of what children really have a right to. And that's probably not such a good example, but the impact of the decisions you make. And Sharon has to do that as a coordinator. Kylie has to do it every day, but they're really important decisions that the scheme makes and that the educator makes each day. Yeah.
So, and how do you get better at it? You know, like, do you just, you know, all of us here have, you know, done pre-service education. We've got qualifications. Lots of our people who are listening here are either developing their qualifications. They've got lots of experience. Is it just a matter of sort of more knowledge, or is it experience? How do you get better at it?
It's a really good question. And hats off to Family Daycare for thinking about focusing on it, because I think it's one of those practices that we just do. Oh, you know, make a decision about this and we don't even think about it. It becomes almost automatic, except when it's something out of the ordinary a bit, then we might stop. So I think spending this time in this PD to just sort of think, yeah, actually I do make decisions every day, big ones and small ones, and those decisions are having an impact. And so I think for me, to get better at it, you need, you know, particularly when we're talking about the bigger decisions, you need to be well informed. So you need to think about what are the pros, what are the cons, who's benefiting from this, who wouldn't, that sort of feel like you know the issue inside and out before you jump in to make a quick decision. And sometimes you have to make quick ones. I think sometimes it's helpful to seek help from somebody else. So if you've been wrestling with a decision and you're not quite sure, will I do this or that, talk to someone you trust, a mentor or another colleague or someone outside the sector even, if you feel they could give you some advice and some sort of perspective. And I think another important thing is to kind of document those decisions. Write them down, keep a journal, keep a diary. That's your professional kind of record of where you've been, how you got there and why you made that decision. And it's good to be able to look back at it and see the growth in your own decision making. That's just some of the things that I think are important.
I can see you nodding, Kylie. Why do you think writing down your decision is a good idea?
Yeah, it's something that I do very regularly. I keep a diary and keep notes of my thinking and my challenges and decisions that I'm working on, short-term, long-term, so that I can come back and reflect on decisions I've made in the past, point of reference for future decisions, record for future communication with management coordinators, and it helps in the long term as well as in that moment to be able to reflect on decisions I've already made, and to think about future growth.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Anne. I think it really helps people to get a bit of a sense of how you do it. Whether, you know, we don't want to think that it's just something that happens, you know, one day you get to be a good decision maker. I think, you know, how long have I been working in early childhood education? 35 years. I feel like I'm still practicing. You know, you're still developing the skills. And I think it is really important for us here to also consider that those decisions that you're making are the very stuff of the accountabilities that we have through the National Quality Standard, and are great to be able to talk about when you have an assessment and rating visit, is to say, I made this decision, this is what happened. Even if the decision wasn't quite right, it's great to be able to say, I made that decision, I learnt from it, and this is how we're progressing. And of course, if you have that resource and available, like you said, Kylie, you can go back and have a look. And just before we go to Sharon, just to talk a little bit about what it means to be a leader in this space, we are investigating in this PD in Your Pocket the difference between legal decisions and ethical decisions. So we just need to sort of sort out that a little bit. And you're saying that there's professional decisions. So are professional decisions made up of both? Can you just take us through that? You know, how do we understand that?
Yeah, and yes, they are made up of both sometimes. they overlap at times. So let's start with the legal decision making. That's, in some ways, that's quite clear cut, because it's governed by the rules and we're mandated to do certain things. So we can't make it up. We can't go, oh, well, you know, I think I won't keep accident records, you know, I don't think they're necessary. I can just tell the parent. We can't, that's not a decision we have a right to make. And you use the word accountability. So I would see the legal decisions are kind of the accountability framework. And sometimes it's really helpful to have that. That could be helpful for an educator to say to a family, well, no, we can't smack them. We're not allowed under our regulations. That's not an option for us. We have a different way of working with children. So the legal requirements, no argument, we must do it. So they're actually quite, they can be stressful, you know, when you're talking about, say, notification to child protection. That's a stressful time. But there is, you know, there's that mandated obligation. You know what you have to do. You've been trained in it. You've done all your child safe organisation work. You've trained up in mandatory reporting, and you just follow the process. But at the same time as that's happening, there's an ethical kind of decision making that's going on. That's about, okay, here's a family in crisis. I have to make a notification, but how am I going to support them through this? How am I going to keep them engaged in the service that I'm offering? Because that's a good place for the child and often a good place for the family as well. So always, you know, not every ethical area will have a legal element to it, but often I think all the legal stuff has a ethical. So even, you know, reporting to a parent about an accident, okay, you've done your legal bit, it's in the accident book, you've signed it, but you have that obligation then to share that with the family, and you're conscious of the family's reaction and you want to support them. So that's beyond what the legal is. You don't just say, here's the report, on your bark, off you go. You say, oh, look, this happened, and, you know, and you talk the family through what happened, what you did, what the outcome's been as far as you can see, and asking them to follow up if it needs follow up. So yes, they are different decisions. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they're completely separate. But I think sometimes we do get a bit confused about that. And so we talk about ethical dilemmas. There's the other one, but a dilemma is when you've got two things that are both good. And sometimes people say an ethical dilemma is between a choice between smacking a child and not smacking. No, that's not a dilemma. That's a legal requirement not to smack. An ethical dilemma is more like a parent says, I don't want my child to have a nap. I'm absolutely certain about that. On the other hand, you're seeing the child and you're witnessing the child getting fatigued, really tired, and not able to cope with what's happening in the afternoon. So somehow or other, you've got to have that decision-making process with the parent or the carer around how can we do this in the child's best interest. That's the way I always go back to what's in the child's best interest, because it's very difficult to say, look, I'm in partnership with families, I follow all the, you know, their recommendations, their advice, and then go against that. Sometimes we might need to work with them to get them to see it from another perspective, and that's the ethical dilemma. So nothing we do should diminish a family's expertise in their own child, but sometimes we have to support them in that work to see something from a different perspective. That's the ethical bit. The legal bit, I think, is reasonably straightforward, clear cut, can be challenging, but sometimes it's a relief that it's there.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, are the tools that you need to know the difference the same as what you said before? You know, is it about, you know, talking to other people so you can clarify what the difference is? You know, is it the same?
Well, I presume every family daycare scheme has protocols around certain things.
Policies and procedures, yeah.
Policies and procedures, so you need to know those, you need to be familiar, and they'd be part of induction, Sharon, I presume. And they probably looked at every now and again and refreshed and have that professional knowledge. Yes, you might check something with a colleague, with Sharon or with somebody else, with your manager. You know, I'm going to make a notification, whatever, and I just need a bit of support for myself here. And this is how I'm going to do it. And documenting is absolutely essential, particularly with the legal stuff. But I think, as you know, Kylie said, keeping a record of your thinking is helpful.
Really good.
And it's professional. I mean, you don't go to a doctor and he hasn't got notes about, or she hasn't got notes about you. You know, if you came in and the doctor's looking at it thinking, who the hell are you? Like, I think they're our professional doctors. They're not necessarily shared with anyone else. They could be, but they don't have to be.
And they don't have to be slick and gorgeous. They are just sort of so that you can remember what you're doing, so that you can clarify.
The only other thing, I think there's a lot of good resources, and I think that Ethics in Action, the book that you and I, Lenny wrote, I think there's really good practical stuff in that if people do a deeper dive into ethical versus legal and dilemmas, etc.
And of course we've got these amazing resources from the ASEQA website, as well as all of your local resources which are developed, including those policies and procedures. So thank you, Anne, for that. You know, I think it's really helpful to sort of clarify what we're talking about. Sharon, we've got to come to you now and say, okay, so in that context, as a leader in family daycare, you're helping your team make decisions, you're making decisions. How did you become and how do you support other people to become great at that process in your experience?
Look, I mean, I just think that you have to have a really strong understanding of governance and leadership. That's really important from the very beginning, and also understand and put practices in place that support our understanding of the framework, support our understanding of the regulations and the law. And how we do it at Ballina Byron Family Daycare is it comes from the very top. It comes from our very committed committee that all have early childhood knowledge and understanding of the National Quality Framework and what their role and responsibility is in running and managing a service. Then it comes down to me that I'm the one that implements it, the one that supports it. And I've always said, you know, and my team make me look good. And they really do, because our team, from our committee to myself through to our coordination unit, our administration staff and our educators all understand their roles and their responsibilities, because what we've put in is a very strong induction from the very beginning. We have a really sound induction. Our policies reflect the regulations, the law, and also the standards, and that enables us then to always fall back onto those in the respect of if an educator needs someone, there is always someone there to support them, whether it be myself, their coordinator, or our administration manager. You know, there's someone there to be able to say, okay, this is where you'll find that information. How can I support you to understand this better? How can I support you to have that difficult conversation with a family or a notification, but still supporting the family in that respect? We also encourage our educators to be critically reflecting on these things at all times. Critical reflection, you know, when we say it to educators, and even when we say it in that, you know, to us in the coordination unit, we all put our hands over our head and wait for the boom. But critical reflection can be really difficult. But if we keep doing it, like as Anne said, reflecting on what our practices are and making them better the next time around, you know, we don't always do them great the first time. And I'm, after, you know, 32 years in this role, I don't always do them great either, but I learn from it each time. And then we put that into practice a little bit better next time.
Very wise words to, really encourage us to think deeply, and which is why those tools are really important and recording some of our decisions. Sharon, can you talk a little bit about some of the legal decisions that your family daycare educator team are making under the law on a daily basis? Can you just give us a couple of examples?
Like, I mean, one that's a prime example at the moment is justification of childcare subsidy. I mean, that's a really big legal obligation that our educators have to receive, have to, invoice, have to receive electronic transferring of money. It's not that here's $50 and, on the old days, and can I owe you 10 for next week.
Yeah.
It has to be done more precisely now, and we all have to be more accountable for that. So that's really important for our educators to understand the importance of being compliant, and making sure that, we're having a great understanding and relationship with families so they understand that obligation and that responsibility. I mean, we've just been through rating and assessment, and the understanding of, the reason why we get rated and assessed is that we're meeting those 7 areas, that we are contributing along the lines to governance and leadership. Sometimes educators go, oh, that's your role as the coordination unit, but it's not. It's all of our roles to be compliant in governance and leadership. And we're all leaders in our own rights. Some educators find it really difficult, like Anne was saying about the sleep. That's the regulations state that children, if they're tired, they have the right to sleep, to rest. But a parent says, no, please don't. They don't go to bed until 10 o'clock at night. So it's not only an ethical decision making there and a role, but it's also illegal. Like, I can't keep a child awake if they're so desperately needing a sleep.
Absolutely.
So that's something on the ground. The biggest, the ones that we find too, with program and practice and how educators, we all know everyone has to program and practice. In Ballina Byron Family Daycare, we give you the right to do it the way you want to do it, and the way
you can decide. You can decide how you do it. But what's the decision that you have to make if you are part of Ballina Byron Family Daycare?
That you're meeting the programming cycle, that you're meeting all of the areas in the programming cycle. So as a coordinator and as our educational leader, how we support that is, regular check-ins. Our educators send their program and practice to us and then to our educational leader, and we're ticking it off and making sure that it is meeting that area. So the educators have autonomy in how they do it, but we are also meeting the area 1 in program and practice if they're feeling, they're fulfilling that cycle. So our educators make decisions on a day-to-day basis, as you said, but how we support that is ensuring that we've got really strong management system in place, that educators know where to come if they need support, or they need that, that ear, or that, that someone that's not connected to it emotionally. But also too, along the way, we do, we make sure that we do in-service trainings to support those things. We also offer, outside training that's there, like, PD in your pocket, or, it comes from, other places as well, to make sure. And we always are checking in, how are you going? How's your decision making going? How's your, have you had to do a hard decision in the last week, or since I saw you last?
Yes.
And
why does that help, Sharon? Why does it help for someone to talk through their decision, with you?
Well, I mean, we all know if we have a decision that we need to make, to get someone else's opinion, it's valuable. It enables us to see it from a different perspective, and for us to say, you have to do that. That's a legal requirement of being a family daycare educator. So how can we get that in place and make it work for you.
Yeah. Great. And I think one more thing I just want to clarify, policies and procedures, what's the role of those in decision making?
Okay. So as I always say to educators, if you're looking for a regulation or a law, look at our policies. And they're simply in the policy. For example, our grievance and compliance policy. Okay, you're having a really difficult tussle with a family about something. Where do I go to get something to say, well, it's my legal responsibility to make sure that, you're not coming in under the influence of alcohol and expect me to hand over your child to you. I know my legal right, I haven't got a legal leg to stand on, but, in our policy, this is what, the steps that I would take to ensure the safety of your child. Yeah. So, those policies, our policies have been written, rewritten, and tweaked over the years to make sure that they are in line with the regulations and the law, as well as the standards, to ensure that we are being compliant. So it's a great place for our educators to go.
Absolutely, Sharon. And I think this is a big shout out for all of our participants who are joining us on this webinar, is to make sure that people are engaging with their policies and procedures, which of course, as Sharon has identified, are required under the law, and a way of understanding those locally, so that if there is an expectation within the law that talks about sleep, for example, then procedures and policies around that, policies and procedures in your local setting, help you know what to do as you encounter that situation. So really importantly, if you feel like your policies and procedures are hard to understand and you don't really quite know them, that's a great conversation to have with your the team, the leadership team, is to say, how do I understand this? I'm not sure about it, because policies and procedures can sometimes be a bit clunky. They're really big and no one reads them. So we want to be able to make them very accessible and clear, and hopefully our educators are really supported by that process. Let's keep going. Kylie, hello again. So you've heard from Sharon and Anne, just in terms of the context. Does it feel overwhelming sometimes? I just thought I'd, sort of check in with you. Does it feel like, oh my goodness, there's lots of things that I'm talking about? What does it feel like to you to be a decision maker?
Look, it's a lot. It's a big responsibility every day. And in family daycare, essentially you're on your own. You haven't got any immediate backup. We've got fantastic support from the coordination unit and manager to make quick calls to and get feedback from, and to bounce thinking off. And that's a fantastic point of reference. We're frontline with the families by ourselves. Yes, so it's a big responsibility day in, day out, to make sure that we're making the best decisions that we can in the moment and for the big picture. And as Sharon was saying, having policies and procedures in place that are strong and reliable and quickly accessible is really beneficial to pop out and have a quick look at when you need to. We read them regularly, but they're always a quick point of reference to just recap on and to share with families. Our policies and procedures reflect the regulations and the law, so it's a very strong source of documentation to share with families when we need it, and we know that this is the law, this is what we must do. Ethical decision making is a little bit trickier, because it's not as clear cut as the legal decisions, where we have a document that we can pull out and this is the law, this is how it is, even though, as Anne was saying, we need to have the ethical background to those decisions with communicating with families. Having the strong documentation of the regulations and the law and the policies and procedures is much easier, I think, to relay on to families, because that's just how it is. And when we're making ethical decisions, it takes, personally, I believe, a bit more thinking, a bit more problem solving, which can be collaborative as well as reflective on our own parts. So there's a lot within the family daycare setting to consider and to weigh up. As a new educator in this kind of setting, it was a big task to set up and to learn new policies and procedures, and to make sure that I was across it all to be running my own business. And how did you get better at it, Kylie? You've been doing it for nearly a year. Did you say? I think it'd be great to hear from you
how you got better at decision making? Is it some of the things that Anne was saying about, documenting, or is it, practice?
Sure, it's a combination of a lot of things. I think it's experience is essential for strengthening these skills. Documentation is a big asset to me. I enjoy writing things down and reflecting and thinking things over. And the more I do it, the better I become at it. I'm not always going to get my decision right, I suppose, but I have the right background to try and make the best decision in the best interest of the children at all times. And I have a strong coordination team behind me who help with these decisions. Often I'll call them and bounce my thinking off them to just to see if I'm on the right track with my thinking, to get feedback. They provide prompts and thinking for me to then go away and consider in my decision making. And it's really great to have a great team just a phone call away when I need it. So I think it's something that's always growing. The more decisions we make, the better at it we become. And the more we reflect on those decisions in our critical thinking and documentation, I think the stronger we become at it. So it takes time, and sometimes we reflect and we think, oh, could have done a little bit better here, or I made a really good decision there. And it's all growth.
Yeah. And can you tell us, a little bit about a decision that you've been making just in the last week or so? Maybe it's a difficult one, something that's sort of been on your mind. Just give us a bit of insight. Now, we probably we don't want to sort of know all of the details. We want to protect the privacy of the children and families that you work with, but just a bit of a sense of some of the sorts of decisions that you're making in the last week, maybe the trickier ones.
Yeah, sure. Look, we're constantly making decisions, some bigger ones, some smaller ones within the setting, and some of them are quick and easy decisions. Some of them take a bit more thinking. I have found in my service in family daycare that having a strong induction and orientation process with families has been really beneficial in creating strong communication skills and good connections with families. Open communication has been essential in being able to communicate these things, being, as I said before, that frontline person. So it's myself and the families every day, in that we can talk through some of these sticky questions, I suppose, things where I can use my professional input to have conversations with families, and they respect, because of our good relationships, where I'm coming from, and they appreciate my professional knowledge, and they take it on board when we have these discussions, such as Anne referred to earlier, perhaps with sleep time and rests and children's needs for rests. And we can talk about the law and the regulations, and we can talk about how we see the child. And I always acknowledge that families are the expert in their child. And I can relate to families as a parent myself in children's sleep needs and how it can impact their night, and you're relatable and you can have these conversations honestly and openly. And I think that's been really critical with families throughout my early childhood career, and that we have these conversations openly and honestly. I've got lots of examples of different ethical decisions that I make day in, day out. A lot of them, I suppose, are bigger picture, and they often relate over and over again within the setting. So as I said before.
Like what? Can you give us a little taste of what some of the things you've decided recently about what?
For example, managing illness in family daycare.
Okay, illness, big one at the moment, in terms of coming out of COVID and, the decisions around those things. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that's important to manage well through any early childhood setting. Yes. But in family daycare specifically, and it's something that I share with my families during my induction process, and it's something that we're continually talking about, is that I'm operating my service within my home with my own children, and I'm the sole educator. So parents have a good understanding of the impact of children perhaps coming to care unwell, and the cycle of illness within our service means that I may not be able to operate and provide care the following week. Indeed. So it's a conversation with and having those strong and open communication skills with the families, and good connections and relationships and reference to our policies and procedures helps us to have those discussions and make good decisions for everyone in the best interest of the children.
And
So
I
that's-
guess this also suggests that, that's, it seems like, that's a very significant one. I think and as we're coming into, winter and, different cycles of colds and flus going through the place, lots of decisions around that. But even the micro decisions that are part of that, are we using tissues, or are we using, what are we doing with those, just in terms of recycling and just the way we use products, all the products that we use, in terms of cleaning products, where are we getting those from? All of those decisions are quite significant. And, the more you think about them, the more you think, well, sometimes I make them and they're good, and sometimes I don't. And I make them and they're not so great. I just want to check in with Anne. What about this mistake thing? Like, if you make a mistake, or you make a decision and you think, oh, that's not the right decision, is there some advice that you can give to our participants here about what happens if you make a mistake, or you make an error in your decision making? Is there advice about what to do in that circumstance?
To err is to be human. I mean, I think that's the first principle. We all make mistakes. And I think, we're always saying that to children. It's okay. So we've got to treat ourselves. It's part of our own well-being, is to be able to say, I make mistakes sometimes and I regret that, but I've learned from that mistake, as Sharon. A scheme has to learn. Individual educators have to learn from those mistakes. That's the critical bit, that you learn from them. You don't keep repeating them. And I'm fascinated by Kylie and Sharon's conversation, because what came out to me was the importance of the relationships. Relationships matter and make a difference. So Kylie can get, I mean, that's an incredibly good example that Kylie gave about decision making around the health business, the sickness story.
Huge.
And what she's built is trust with those families and relationships with those families. And so they start to join the dots. If they bring a sick child in, Kylie gets sick, then there's no family daycare for anyone.
That's right.
That's the shared obligation to children and each other. That's the ethics. That's the ethics of our work. That's why we can't ignore the ethics, because if we ignore the ethics and we just focus on the regulations and the technical stuff, then we'll never bring families with us on as partners in this work.
Exactly.
I just think you can't underestimate that. And I love Kylie's idea. I think she said you're becoming braver with your decisions as you gain experience.
Yeah.
I think it's fair enough if you're just out of training, if you just finished your TAFE, that you'll be a bit conservative with your decision making, because you don't want to make too many mistakes, and that's fair enough. But with experience and reflection and more knowledge, then I think you get braver with your decisions.
I guess too, and in that, and Sharon, I'd love you to comment too, is that I think given our regulatory environment, we need to be very upfront and open and transparent if a decision we've made is not correct. Our regulatory authorities want us to be transparent about that. And, let's hope that some of those things don't have dire consequences, but we do need to be as upfront as, and in fact, I think that's what makes you a professional too, is that you are upfront and open about those, and then you rectify them, and you take strategies to ensure that they don't happen again, which of course is why our regulators do help us do that. Sharon, do you want to comment about that? Like, how do you support people to sort of get, recover from maybe a decision that's not quite right and then keep going?
Sure. Look, I mean, I think if nothing else, which COVID taught me, is that, you really had to think on your feet, and that ever-changing environment and rules and regulations, and keeping on top of those. And I remember, going home and saying, I'm never going to apologise for making a decision that I feel is in the best interest of the children and the families and the educators at the time. And there was sometimes I had to say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. And as you said, there wasn't dire consequences around that, but then I had to just back off a little bit. And that's what I tell educators. You can't come on and think that you know it all, because you don't. None of us know it all. Like Anne said before, we're all still learning. We're all, we've been in it for all different amounts of times, and we're still learning the the ropes. But if we can be collaborative and understand where, you know, our regulations come from and our laws come from, and, you know, ask for help. If one of our coordinators sees something that's not quite right in a service, hopefully our relationships are strong enough to be able to say, hang on a moment, you know, I'm seeing something here. Let's have a discussion about it. And that's why I said, you know, from the very beginning, we form really strong relationships with not only our educators, but with our families. Every one of our families have an interview with the coordination unit, and we go through our policies. We go through what your expectations are, what our expectations are, what the educators' expectations are, and how we can all marry that together and work collaboratively for the best interests of the children in care. So there are going to be some, you know, sometimes that we have to go, hang on a minute, this is a really big one and we have to deal with it right now. Or we can say, okay, I'm going to give you a call later. Let's have a discussion about what's going on here and see if we can do it better.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That's a really great piece of advice, I think, is to, you know, to really work collaboratively to make sure that our decisions are in the best interest of children. They are compliant, but they also are relational. They help to continue the really dynamic and I think very special relationship that we have with families and children and our family daycare educators out there in communities all across New South Wales and of course across Australia. So that does bring us to our panel conversation, everybody. You can see by this conversation that we could have talked all day about this really important matter. And we hope that what this has done is given you a little bit of an insight about some of the conversations that you might like to have with your colleagues in your family daycare context. So at another time, you might want to come together in a professional learning space and talk about how you make decisions and what you understand to be the legal and ethical components of that. And we hope that these conversations have helped you understand that a little bit more deeply. Thanks everybody for joining me. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Kylie. And thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.